Okay, and thanks for joining me on this review for Corel AfterShot Pro. Corel AfterShot Pro is a photo management program as well as a raw processing application such as Lightroom. If we start from the left, you have your library. Here you have your catalogs, which is like in, say, Lightroom you have catalogs, but if you want to switch catalog, you have to dump out and open a different catalog. With Corel AfterShot Pro, you can create multiple catalogs and switch between them without closing the program. You then have your file system to access things like downloads, documents, and your batch output options here. I should start off by saying that at the time of making this, I'm using version 1.2.0.7, which is the latest version at this time. They do seem to update very often with new updates for such things as new RAW formats and camera lens profiles, so they do update a lot. Okay, let's get started. So if we go to, say, one of our catalogs here, let me have a look, say here. They open up as thumbnails here. You can then select one. Here's a photo I took with my Sony A57 outside in the street when it was actually quite dark out. You just had the street lamps, and it took a really low light photo using one of its handheld twilight modes. And so here we have it. Then you start basically by looking at the right side once you open up your picture. You have auto levels, which in this case hasn't actually done too bad a job, although I think I preferred it before. This is really hit and miss, like a lot of auto options in things like Photoshop and many programs. A lot of pictures it doesn't work so well on. Same with perfectly clear, which is very similar, but it does a few more things like sharpening and stuff at the same time. In this case it has done a similar job to the auto, and it isn't too bad actually. I'm going to put auto on to show you another option in a minute. We then have tint. So you have tint max, tint minimum, tint off, and that works I think along with this. You then have white balance. As shot is how the camera, whoops, let me turn that off then. Why is it not? Okay, this is not a problem I normally have. For some reason I'm not able to use the drop down for white balance. But basically it's like any other program. You get as shot, which is default, which is whatever the camera has decided is correct white balance. Or if you manually selected in your camera, then if you selected say tungsten, then that will be what it is. But then you'd also be able to manually select different ones here, custom yourself, just like you can in Photoshop, Lightroom, things like that. So I'm not quite sure why the drop down isn't working. Also temperature is grayed out. But basically what this does, let me just select another picture to see if this is odd. I don't have this normally, but anyway, what temperature is kind of, if you got it looking very warm and you want it to look a bit like it's cold, a cold scene, then you can turn it to the left here to make it a bit more of a blue tint, or a bit more orange to warm up, things like that. It's pretty much standard sort of option in most of these sort of programs. Then you have straighten. I'll show you that. Of course it was already straight, so it's made it look very strange, but that would be if your photo was slightly, there we go, slightly off, so you tilted a little bit to the right, you could then straighten it using that. You can also, so if I actually do it again, if we double click the name of the option you've changed, it'll put it back to default. Same with exposure or anything here. So exposure, I won't go into great detail about these because this is just a little review, it's not a tutorial as such. Okay, so it's exposure, we have fill light, we have the blacks, we have contrast, saturation, right from no sort of colour all the way up very bright, and then vibrance, which is more of a subtle version of saturation, which is the one you're most likely going to use rather than saturation much. Hue, you can actually get weird effects doing that. Like that is very odd. Sharpening, to get it a bit more sharp and crisp looking. Noise Ninja is actually a third-party program that they've included built in, and it reduces any noise you might have in your picture, which is that sort of grainy look if you like zoom in. I don't think I've got much noise to show. Let's see here a minute. No, I haven't really got much that needs done, but as you see there is a bit of an effect there. Basically I use Sharp Noise Ninja quite a lot. It works very well, although you don't want to overdo it. Now raw noise is similar and it's grayed out. What I think I've done here is this here is a version. So if I right click and go to versions, you can make, basically if you have the original raw file, it is known as a master, and you can make a new one from the master which is identical. You can make a new copy basically of it from whatever changes you've made. And I think this here, I'm not sure why I haven't opened up the original, but these seem to be versions of the master raw file. I think that's why some of these options are grayed out. So if it was the original raw file, you'd have this normally ticked by default. With this, it reduces some of the actual raw noise, and it does a good job. And if you need any extra, you can use Noise Ninja, and that is actually very useful. Like I say, neither of these you really want to overdo. You can use keywords here. You have some presets such as black and white IR simulation. Let me undo that. Bleach bypass. That looks quite weird. Let me put auto back on anyway, as I was saying earlier, because I'm going to go to colour next. It's not colour actually, it's under, but we'll come to it in a minute. Here you can also do your manual black point, grey point and white point, and auto contrast. Now as you can see, auto contrast I find tends to overdo it a lot. That depends upon the picture, so let's just turn this off actually, go back to it and try it on its own. Yeah, on its own it's not too dire, but sometimes I don't use that. In fact, more often than not I don't use it because it does overdo it. Now this is a wonderful little tool here, colour correction. So say we wanted to change the blues to a different colour. This can be useful if the picture isn't too complicated. So I've selected blue, well it's sort of a purpley blue, so let's just give it a try anyway. Go to hue, you see I'm changing it to like green. In this picture it's quite complicated because you've got the light blue, the dark blue in the sky and all that. But if you just had a basic picture, like one of my pictures I've got is of a swimming pool with like a life belt in it, and the life belt is orange and the water is just sort of blue. So if you select like orange, you can select that life belt really well and then change it to say yellow or red or green, and it works really well. In this picture it's going to take more work than it not be quite so simple, but let's try something like red and see what we get there. So yeah, some of the reds being changed now, so you can get some really funky effects. Let's try some of the other options just to see. Okay, anyway, then you have colour balance, so you can adjust your colour balances a bit here. And it's to help with colour correction, or if you are trying to get a weird effect like we just had it a minute ago. Let me back up a little bit. Something like that, you see, weird sort of effect, and you can do it there. You also have down here white balance again, which is not letting me select it because I'm on not on the master file. But you do have click white balance tool, which is quite handy. You can click here, go into the picture, find something you know is white, which there isn't much white left because of all this weird effects we've been doing, but you would find something that you thought was white and click it, and then there's your custom white balance. You have your colour profile down here. I'm trying to rush a bit not to make this video too long. It's turning into too much of a tutorial rather than a review, but never mind. Here you have exposure, and you have your auto levels for that. In which case, because we've done so much else with it, with weird colours, it's turned out very odd and doesn't really work, but sometimes it works quite well. So perhaps if we went into this one, maybe, yeah, you see it didn't have such a weird effect, and then you can manually adjust the options. So let's go here, sharpening. You can adjust your sharpen here as well, and your sensitivity of the sharpen. Your raw noise if you were in your original raw file, and Noise Ninja here is more settings for it with the smooth and strengthen. You then have your lens correction. You can enable it here, resize image or not. You then select your brand, such as in my case Sony, although I do have a Sigma lens as well. So we go here to Sony, you then select your model, which unfortunately they have loads of Sony Alpha models, but for some reason they have the 58 and the 55, but so far they haven't added the 57. And also what I've noticed on the 58, if you go into 58, it says they're Sony E lenses, not A lenses. Well, Alphas don't use E lenses. Then the Sony NEX use an E mount, not an A mount. So these are actually the wrong type of lenses anyway for the 58. But you might not have that problem if you had, say, a Canon or a Nikon. You might have the exact model and the exact lens. Just happens to be they haven't got quite the right ones for my Sony yet. You have your chromatic aberration correction here. If you have any like green or red lines around the edges when you zoom in, you can fix it here. You can enable a vignette correction if your lens has left a bit of a vignette around the edges, and you can use mirror and invert here. Here's your metadata, and you can manage it here as well and add what sort of things you want, like IPTC title, or remove it, go down your list, add, and just basically manage your meta tags in general here. Here's your keywords, which is exactly the same as the ones in the other panel I showed a minute ago. And you also have keyword sets you can make and select from. One of the tools people especially like about this program is it does have plugins, and you can get free plugins such as normally made by third parties. You have things like for GPS set tools, plugin managers, so you manage your plugins a little bit better. You have a few built-in plugins such as I think this grain, no, I'm not sure who these were or not, I can't remember which ones I've added now, but this black and white one was definitely built in, and then you can make your image black and white without desaturating it, because if you desaturate a picture it takes all of the color information out and makes it black and white, whereas if you properly make an image black and white you still have the color information left in, and it tends to look better. And then you can select from different sort of styles in the drop down, and there's also more options here for it. You also have a color equalizer. This I think is one I've added, so you probably won't have that by default. Now if I take off, where is it, black and white, you also have layers like in Photoshop. So you can pull down here, and I've only got the main layer, but if you click here, here we go, your layer manager, just like Photoshop. And here we can add an adjust layer or a heal and clone layer. So if we were to add a heal and clone layer, you could then go in and say you had a portrait of somebody with a spot on their chin or cheek, you can then remove it like you do with the tools in Photoshop. Adjust layer, you then mask out the area you want, and then you can then adjust, say, your exposure, saturation, contrast, and it would only affect that area. It's all very much like how you use layers in Photoshop, and you've got duplicate and invert layer and delete layers up here. You can close it there and always get back to it here. And if you have more than one layer, you have a drop down now for it here. Down here is your general hand tool, just to move it around if you need to, if you're zoomed in. You also have your click for white balance here, like I showed you a minute ago from the other area. You also have here your crop tool. Now with your crop tool enabled, you can enable crop, and there's our crop with rules a third in. You then can select a sort of a preset for like 1x1 square, which looks like that, or where was it? Widescreen. And somewhere here I had it on and I cannot see it. Oh, here it is. It's 35mm. But you can also select the aspect ratio in pixels, fit, and done. And you can also move it around where you want it. And if you select custom, let's have custom, you can manually select the size in any aspect ratio, any size you want, like that. Then if we hit done, there we go, we've cropped our picture. And it's good you can see the rules a third as well. And there we go, back to original by on Mac pressing Command Z, or on Windows Control Z. Just like in most programs, they use that same shortcut. Now down here we also have the straighten tool here as well, and also a region cursors. Here's your zoom, you probably seen me use earlier. Up here you have slideshow, and then you select various things for the slideshow of your pictures, including you can even include information such as your ISO rating and shutter speed to display on it and make of the camera. But you can turn that off. You can turn off auto advance. Let's just close that for now. It's really just an extra. You probably won't use it much. I know I don't. Thumbnail view gets back to your thumbnail view in your catalogue. Standard view is like that. Image view is like that without the other pictures in your way. Magnifier and full screen. Let's take it full screen. There we go. Then we can press that again, and there we go, back to our normal window. Although on Mac at the moment it seems to be, if you full screen it and come out, it's doing this weird, not coming out properly, because it's got like this whole bit here all selected weird. Basically, if that happens, until they patch it, you can just dump out and back in if it's in the way. But you can still use the program fine anyway. So I think I've been through most of this. Basically, it's an excellent raw processor and file manager for your pictures. Also, it's cheaper than most similar programs. At the moment, in pounds, in UK pounds, it costs £80 if you get it new straight from Corel, or you might be able to find it from third parties for less. In US dollars, it's normally apparently $99, but at the moment I notice, I don't know how long it's going to be like it, but at the moment it's $50. So it's a very, very cheap alternative to other programs such as Lightroom. And I have tried Lightroom, but I stick with this program. I own it now, it's cheaper, and it's great, and it's been updated all the time with new lenses. It's not one of these programs that has just been abandoned, made, put up for sale, and never updated like some software. It is getting updates on a regular basis. Now to quickly show you preferences, I won't tell you what they all are because there's a lot to go through, but basically you have plenty of preferences to adjust if you want, such as general, your display, your color profiles, default for JPEGs, TIFFs, system, you just use the system default for your monitor or select one, your import options, your renaming options, all sorts here, such as copy sets, default settings, cropping, and you can add new presets for your crop options. You can select what you want to use as your external editor, such as Photoshop, and default color space. You have your performance to select how many cores you want it to use. It is multi-core, and it now, if you are patched up to the latest version, it includes support for Opengl, which, as it says, increases the application's processing speed, as long as you have a new enough graphics card, of course. One thing I nearly forgot to mention that I will show you is if I go, whoops, here we go. Now say I have this one here. This is a feature that people find very handy in this program. Say this is a style and all the settings that I want to use for multiple pictures, especially if I've got a series of pictures at a certain theme or location or whatever. Right, I can save time by going here, settings. Whoops. If I find it now. Okay, maybe it's under edit then. Let's have a look here. Okay, copy image settings. Also, you can use your normal shortcut of Command or Control C. So if you copy image settings, go over to, let's say we want it on this one. Edit, paste image settings. Whoops. And there we go. I'm not sure why it's all zoomed like that. Maybe I'll have to dump out because of this problem, I'm not sure. But as you can see, go here, paste it here if I want. There you go, it's gone from being that black and white version I had to this. So if you have lots of pictures that you want to use the same or very similar settings, you can copy your settings from one of your pictures and paste onto another one. Or let's go back. Right, undo. Right, we can do this on multiple pictures. So I can copy from this like I did before. I can select this one, I can hold down Command or Control and select this other picture, or I can even select this one as well. Now I've got 3 pictures selected at the same time, and I can right click and paste image settings, and I can paste to multiple at the same time. Really handy feature that a lot of people find very useful. So I give this program, I would say, I'm almost tempted to give it 5 out of 5, but the reason I'll give it 4 out of 5 is because at the moment not enough perhaps lenses are supported and raw formats, but you can go to their website and go to the tech specs for this program before you buy it, and there is a page which lists what raw formats it supports, because it supports loads of lenses, but as you can see, such as the A57 with the A mount isn't supported for the lens correction yet. Also, I know perhaps hasn't got great raw file format support if you use Fuji cameras, because it doesn't support raw files yet from the HS20, which is a very popular model. In fact, I think it only supports currently 1 or 2 Fuji models, such as I think the X100 and the X100S maybe, but basically it hasn't got very good raw support for Fuji cameras. So make sure, if you definitely want to use this for raw processing, even though you can edit your JPEGs as well, if you mostly want it for raw format, which is the whole idea really, make sure you check your camera supported. But having said that about the lens on my camera, I should note that the A57 does at least have full support in this program for its raw format, because I've been using, like, these seem to be versions, that's why I'm not getting all the settings, but they were, at least originally when I opened them up in here, not JPEGs, they were Sony's raw format from my camera. So yeah, basically there is a trial available. Get the trial, check the compatibility page, see if your camera is supported, and I highly recommend it. Definitely 4 out of 5, but because it doesn't support perhaps quite enough yet, and also at least on Mac we have this little full screen glitch here, I'll say 4 out of 5, but with a few more updates I would probably change that to 5 out of 5. So I'll put a link in the description, and thanks for watching. Please rate, comment and subscribe.